Look at the screen, Michael. Michael, look at it.
With Fahkumram releasing in just about 2 weeks, I thought it would be a good time to talk about Bruce and pretty much say my goodbyes to the character. You know, when I first showed up into Tekken, I didn't know anything about nothing. I wasn't connected to the tournament scene. I wasn't connected to the legacy of the franchise. I was someone who played many different games. Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, basically the shooters, run and gun. And then when I first discovered fighting games was like the Street Fighters, the Mortal Kombats, I never even heard of Tekken until way later. But then when I discovered the franchise, I loved it. I was like, what is this? How have I missed this? 3D movement, so many cool and unique characters. It felt like I was entering a whole new world and I loved it. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 was the first Tekken that I purchased with my own cash and played it every single day. And Bruce was a big part of that. You know, Bruce was very, from what I can see, popular in that game. We don't have statistics, we don't have the data, so we can't get a global representation of that game. But when I went online, Bruce was a character who was played, and he was a character who, like, I kind of built like a relationship with. Like, there's a lot of characters who exist in a game, but you don't really have like an opinion of them. For example, characters who were like that for me back in the Tekken Tag Tournament 2 era was Lee and like Fang. And really, I just think it speaks to how big the roster is, right? 60 something characters on a roster. There's no way you're going to have a fond memory of all of them. So Bruce being a character that I connected to, it made me realize a couple of things about the character. One, why players like him, like the players who do like him, but then also I do understand the people who think he's kind of generic, right? Okay, bad segue, but let's talk about that aspect. Bruce's design in comparison to modern designs, you talk about 2025 character designs, he is undercooked. But if you go back to that era of Tekken Tag Tournament 2 when the game released and whatnot, and you compare him to many different other fighting games and designs, his design is pretty much on par with a lot of those characters. A lot of the characters in Tekken are like goofballs, or they're jokes, or they're just kind of goofy. But Bruce, with the limited information I knew about his story and the character, it seems like he was on a mission. It seemed like he had something that he was trying to achieve, something that he wanted to do. Where characters like Paul, Phoenix, Law, even King in certain instances, it just seems like those characters are okay with being themselves and just having fun or living in the moment. But Bruce, Miguel, these characters are like they have a destination, right? And that's kind of what I felt when I played against him, when I heard like his win quotes, like I am your worst nightmare. Like all of that stuff was so cool, and it made me like the character. Now, something else you could talk about with Bruce is how powerful he is. Now, back in my Tekken Tag Tournament 2 days, I wasn't the best at Tekken. I threw out launch punishable launchers all the time, and I could barely do combos. But Bruce was still a character who challenged me a lot, and not necessarily because the character was like super overpowered or anything. For those of you guys who were really good at Tekken Tag Tournament 2, you could comment on whether or not he was tournament viable, etc. But you know, when you're dealing with the lower levels of skill, everyone's just doing everything. But for him, he's kind of like Brian Ferry in that aspect. Brian Ferry is a character where, yes, the character can be busted or really strong or whatever, but the player, you can still see that they're doing a lot to make it work. You can see the dedication, the time, how much effort they're putting into it. It's not just like a work, do whatever type of character, right? Bruce, in my opinion, was, when I went up against him, it felt like the players had a certain amount of skill and understanding about the game, and that's something that I've always respected. When I get upset about characters being super overpowered and broken, it's because players can do well with them, can win with them without having that type of passion or dedication, and it makes it feel hollow. It makes it feel cheap. It makes it feel like disrespectful in a way. How can you win when you don't even care to learn the intricacies of the game? Which is why Tekken 8 is crazy, because that's who they're catering to. But focusing on Bruce, I think Bruce is a really cool character, and he hones in on a lot of what make Tekken Tekken. Even though I play Yoshimitsu, who's kind of like a made up nonsense character, he doesn't do any real martial arts. He's supposed to be a samurai, but he's more ninja than samurai. But then he's also more make-believe than ninja. It's like he's a very, non-realistic character. But even with that being the case, I could still sit back and appreciate how the developers were able to capture these martial arts and turn it into something that players can really like understand, be inspired by, and learn from. This is also the reason why I think a lot of people like Bruce as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bruce just brings a certain type of realism to Tekken. And if you talk about in the later games how that's being lost, I mean, what character in Tekken 8 brings a type of realism? In the past, where you were able to relate to so many different characters and the struggles that they go through, or even just the surface level understanding of the character, with Tekken 8, you can't really do that. A lot of the characters are just mimicking themselves. In Tekken 8, a lot of the characters are just generic stereotypes of themselves. Steve, King, Yoshi, Kazuya, and I don't mean to name names, and I don't want to like say, oh, your character sucks, this character sucks. I'm just trying to highlight how, for me, Bruce brought a lot of personality. He brought a lot of confidence. He brought a lot of arrogance. He brought a lot of persona. Without him, it's different. One thing that I do think is interesting with Bruce, and this is something that I've brought up quite frequently, which is why people think that I hate Bruce, but I hope this video will show you guys that I don't. But the thing that I always talk about is how Bruce probably, like, we don't have the actual statistics, but he probably did not have good statistics. I mean, how many characters in fighting games or in many games were replaced as many times as Bruce? Bruce was initially replaced by Brian Ferry going into Tekken 3, but could we fault him for that? Because a lot of characters were replaced going in. I mean, Kazuya was replaced by Jin. Jin has a lot of Kazuya's movesets. If you look at Tekken 3 Jin, Baek Dusan was replaced by Harong. So should we fault Bruce for that? Maybe not. But if you talk about later into the franchise, how Bruce was then replaced by Josie, that is a very interesting one because I am a big fan of Josie. I think Josie has one of the best fighting styles in Tekken. I think she is one of the most fair, one of the most fun, and also I think you can learn a lot from playing Josie. Not learn the fighting style, but learn how to play Tekken. Tekken has a lot of bully characters, a lot of knowledge check characters, and there's very few characters where you can just fight with them, interact with them, and understand the mechanics, understand the structure without getting completely destroyed for making a simple mistake. This is why Tekken 8 is so chaotic. Tekken 8, there's little room for experimentation because everything you do is going to be punished significantly. But going back to Tekken 7 Josie, she, in my opinion, was a character who felt very fair and honest, and there was a lot to experience there. Even the design of the character was really cool. I think the one major flaw, though, was the personality. The crying, the whimpering, all of that stuff. I don't know who they were trying to cater to when they designed that, but it really missed. And that miss was big enough for players to really demand Bruce. And Bruce was one of the most requested characters for all of Tekken 7. But then when you talk about when they got to Season 3 DLC, this is where things really got dicey because they announced the character Fahkumram, and then they told us his fighting style was Muay Thai. He had a little bit of Bruce in that game. In Tekken 8, he's going to have more of Bruce. You talk about Bruce's back too. Michael Murray basically confirmed they're giving that to Fahkumram in Tekken 8. But in the early days of Fahkumram's creation, he was basically Bruce, but they changed him and overhauled him so much to where he wasn't Bruce anymore, and now he's just some totally different thing. And then I know on Twitter, Michael Murray and Harada, they say how if a character is requested, they can show up. I mean, how true is that? Because in my opinion, at the end of Tekken 7, some of the most requested characters in the game was Raven, Jun Kazama, and Bruce. Now, Raven is here. His usage is really low, so you have to wonder, all the people who were requesting Raven, where did they go? And then even with Jun Kazama, she's a little bit more popular than Raven, but she is hovering in the middle of the pack in terms of popularity, in terms of usage, and she's slipping a little bit. Now, whether she's slipping because of balance or people are just getting bored of the character, who knows? Who knows why Jun Kazama is slowly falling towards the bottom? But maybe that has impacted the reason why they decided to go with Fahkumram over Bruce. You know, this is something that Tekken struggles with, where the players request something so heavy, but then when it shows up for whatever reason, I don't know the reason. I see a lot of people talking about this, but we don't know why when a thing is released, players don't engage with it, or if they do, they engage with it for a very short moment. And when you talk about how popular Fahkumram was, yes, you could talk about the usage data, yes, you could talk about pay to win DLC. Regardless, Fahkumram was top 5 most played character in the whole game. That is something that Bruce will have to rival every single time they want to do a Muay Thai kickbox type character. Bruce main hurdle is Fahkumram's usage data. Now, for all the people who like Bruce like myself, and I like Fahkumram as well, right? I like both of these characters pretty evenly from different perspectives. You know, I could talk about all the reasons why I like Fahkumram design. I think his gameplay is cool. It's too overpowered, right? We could go down that route. But the point that I wanted to make is that when you talk about the Tekken 7 DLC that showed up later on, the ones that are existing in Tekken 8 are doing horrible in terms of usage. Leroy Smith was also one of the most played characters in all of Tekken 7. In Tekken 8, he's literally at the bottom of the pack. Same thing with Zafina. Well, Zafina's always low usage, so her usage carry over. But Lydia was another most played character and female character. And I think this is why they rushed her into Tekken 8 in Season 1. But when you look at her Tekken 8 popularity, even Harada said she is the lowest used character in the whole game. Now, his explanation for that is that characters, when they're first released, they are the least played in the game. But even then, when we talk about how time has progressed since then, Lydia's usage is still terrible. Fahkumram, even though he had high usage, he is not guaranteed to be a smashing success. Now, the developers probably will try to do that because they want their DLC to be successful, and this is where the fear comes in, because people are already fearing how powerful he'll be, how scary he'll be. But when you just talk about, Bruce main obstacle being Fahkumram's usage data, pay close attention to that, and we will when Fahkumram releases, because if it's high, Bruce is probably most certainly dead. But if his usage is low or it's slipping, there's still hope.
Michael, take some time. Take some time when you have some time and you're on the internet, and just Google Tekken 6 and look at some Bruce matches in Tekken 6 and watch that shit. And look at it. Look at the way the hit sparks look. Look at the way the kicks look, the combos. And then I want you to go and watch this.
Thank you.
And that's it. That's all I want you to do.